Hey, my name is Owen. I'm 33 years old, and I live in a one-bedroom apartment in Grayford, Pennsylvania, a small city between Pittsburgh and the state line that nobody moves to on purpose, and most people leave as soon as they have a reason. The kind of place where the buildings downtown are still solid, but half the storefronts have paper in the windows, and the river through it has a walking path that was beautiful once, and still mostly is, if you don't look too hard at the edges. I work for the Regional Rail Authority. Not driving trains, I'm a maintenance planner. I sit at a desk and build the service windows. Which car gets pulled for inspection on which day? Which brake system is overdue? Which stretch of track is going to need a crew by spring? It is almost entirely a job done in a spreadsheet, coordinating with people in other offices over a ticketing system that was outdated when it was installed and is now roughly as modern as a rotary telephone. It does not sound like a job that would make a person feel anything in particular about trains. But I ride the Grayford to Pittsburgh line twice a week for regional meetings. And after 6 years of planning the maintenance on every car in the fleet, I know those trains better than I know most people. I know which cars run quiet and which ones rattle at the third connection. I know which windows seal properly and which ones let the cold in through the lower corner in February. I know the sound of a well-maintained set of wheels on a well-maintained track, smooth and steady. A kind of white noise that is the closest thing I know to silence that doesn't feel empty. My life is organized. I get up at 6:15, make coffee, eat something, read whatever I'm in the middle of, usually something about infrastructure or city planning, which tells you a fair amount about the kind of person I am. I walk to the office because it is 8 minutes from my apartment, and I prefer walking to any alternative. I work until 5:30 or 6. I come home, I cook, which I am actually decent at, though I am cooking for one. So I've become efficient at making things that scale down well. I watch the news sometimes, or read more of whatever I'm reading, and I'm in bed by 10:30. I do not have a complicated life. I have a calibrated one. The calibration came from a specific place. For 5 years, I was in a relationship with a woman named Diane. And for the last 2 of those 5 years, I knew, in the way you know something when you stop looking directly at it and start looking around it, that I was in it partly because I was good at the logistics of being in a relationship, and not necessarily because I was still in love with the person. Diane is a good person. She figured it out before I said anything, in the way that people who are paying attention often do. And she ended it calmly and without drama, and she was correct to. The part that stayed with me was not the loss of the relationship. It was the realization that I had let 2 years pass on the wrong track because changing tracks was going to require a moment of real disruption. And I had gotten very good at keeping things smooth. That is the thing about maintaining trains. You learn to detect deviations early, small vibrations, sounds that are not quite right. The system depends on catching problems before they become failures. I had built my entire professional life on that skill, and my personal life on the opposite, on ignoring the early signals because I would rather keep the schedule than stop the train. That was 4 years ago. I'd made a kind of peace with it. The calibrated life had its merits. Nobody got hurt if things stayed smooth. The Wednesday in late November that this story's about started like any Wednesday I'd ridden that line. I had an 8:30 meeting in Pittsburgh, which meant the 6:50 train, which meant the one thing I actually dislike about the twice-weekly meetings. The 6:50 is the oldest consist on the route, and it rattles at the third connection exactly the way I know it does because it's on my list for February and not before. I had my laptop bag, my coffee thermos, and the specific resignation of a man who has been riding the same train for 6 years and still cannot make himself arrive at the platform more than 45 seconds before departure. I got on. The car was about a third full. Commuters, mostly, people with the particular inward-facing posture of people who ride trains before 7 in the morning, each one carrying their own quiet like a carried object. I found a window seat toward the back, set my bag on the overhead, sat down, and opened my laptop. I was not going to sleep. I had work to do and a presentation to review, and I was going to be useful for the next hour and 14 minutes. The train pulled out. I looked at the presentation. I had looked at it 4 times already this week, and I knew it was fine, and my brain refused to engage with it at the level it needed. And after 8 minutes, I closed the laptop and looked out the window at the pale gray morning going past. The back edges of Grayford, the first fields, the bare tree lines, and something in the rhythm of the wheels on the track did what it always does, which is pull me under. I wasn't asleep. I want to be clear about that. My eyes were closed, and my head was tipped slightly against the window, and I was in the specific half-conscious state that happens when you're very tired and very warm, and the motion of something is regular and trustworthy. I could hear the car around me. I could have opened my eyes at any moment. I just didn't. The train stopped at Millsboro, the first stop, 12 minutes out. I heard the doors, the shuffle, the settling of people finding seats. I did not open my eyes. It felt intrusive suddenly to open them, like surfacing from something I didn't want to leave yet. I kept them closed. Someone sat down next to me. I registered it without registering it. The slight shift of the seat, the presence beside me in the way you sense another person's warmth without seeing them. I stayed where I was, eyes closed, head against the window. For a few minutes there was nothing from that direction, just the sounds of someone settling, the soft sound of a bag being opened and closed, the small movements of a person getting situated. Normal, invisible to me. I was still in the half-understate, the wheels steady, the gray morning going past behind my closed eyelids. Then, about 5 minutes past Millsboro, the person next to me shifted. A small movement, barely anything. And then I heard, very quietly, barely above the sound of the train, more breath than voice. I got the call this morning. A pause. Screening came back positive. So, another pause. That's what that is. I did not move. My entire body went from half asleep to completely still in about a half second. The kind of stillness that happens when you know that if you move, you change what is happening. I don't know who else to tell, she said, barely above a whisper. I don't want to tell Mom until I know more because she'll panic, and I can't tell Jess yet because she's got enough, and I just... A short, controlled exhale. I just needed to say it out loud to someone, even if that someone is asleep. The train swayed slightly on a curve. The wheels did their sound. My coffee thermos was still in my hand, I realized, and I had not moved it. Please don't wake up, she said. Very quiet, a little dry, a little desperate. I'm doing fine. I just needed a minute. She stopped. I heard her breath even out slowly, the deliberate, practiced kind of breathing that people do when they are pulling themselves back together. A few seconds. Then nothing. I did not move for a long time. I kept my eyes closed and my body still, and I thought about what I had just heard, about what it costs a person to say something true when they think no one is listening. And I thought about the 2 years I had spent not saying true things because the track was smooth and the schedule was working. I stayed still for another 10 minutes. I let her have whatever she needed from the silence. And then, slowly, I opened my eyes. She was looking out the window. She was somewhere around 30, 31. Dark auburn hair pulled back in a low knot, a little loose at the sides. A dark coat, practical, not new, with the collar turned up. She had her hands in her lap, folded, and she was holding them a little tighter than hands need to be held when you are just sitting on a train. She had a tote bag on the floor between her feet with a thermos of her own and a folder of papers visible at the top. She looked like someone who had decided she was fine and was winning, mostly on points. She did not look at me when I opened my eyes. She kept looking out the window. I almost said nothing. It was easier to say nothing. To check my phone, pull out the laptop, pretend I had been asleep through all of it. She had said she wanted that. She had asked for that. But I thought about what she'd said. I just needed to say it out loud to someone. And I thought about how that is not actually what people need when they say it. What they need when they say it is for the someone to be real. I wasn't asleep, I said. She went completely still. I'm sorry, I said. I wasn't trying to. I didn't plan to hear it. I was almost asleep when you sat down, and then I didn't know how to. I stopped, looked at the seat back in front of me. I should have said something sooner. That was wrong of me. I'm sorry. The silence between us had a different quality now. Not the comfortable silence of people who don't know each other on a train. Something else. How much did you hear? She said. Her voice was flat and controlled. Enough, I said. The screening. That you haven't told anyone. Another silence. Well, she said, and nothing else for a moment. Then, okay, I'll get off at the next stop if you want, I said. I can get the next train. You don't have to. You have somewhere to be, she said. It was not a question. She had registered somehow, the laptop bag, the work posture of a person with a meeting. Don't get off the train because of me. Then let me at least. You don't have to do anything, she said. Her voice was still even, still controlled, but something in it had a slight tremor beneath the surface, the way a structure has a vibration you can feel if you put your hand on it. I said what I said, and you heard it, and it's fine. I'm fine. You don't have to be fine right now, I said. She turned and looked at me for the first time. Her eyes were gray, not the dull gray of a cloudy sky, but the gray of river water, something moving underneath. She was assessing me the way you assess something when you do not yet know if it is safe. I don't know you, she said. No, I said. My name is Owen. I work for the rail authority, planning side, not operations. I ride this train every Wednesday and Friday. I've been doing it for 6 years, and I have never once spoken to anyone because I am, constitutionally, a person who finds it easier to keep things smooth. She looked at me. And now? And now someone sat next to me and said something true when they thought no one was listening, I said. And I think the least I can do is be the person who was actually there. She was quiet for a moment. The train swayed on another curve. Outside, the fields were giving way to the first outskirts of the next town, pale in the November morning. It might be nothing, she said finally, still facing forward. The screening. It came back with something that needs a follow-up. It's not, they didn't say it's definite. It's a next step. Okay, I said. The follow-up is in 2 weeks. So for 2 weeks, I just sit with this. What do you do? I said. For work. She glanced at me, surprised by the turn. I'm a structural engineer. Bridges, mostly. I work out of the Pittsburgh office, but I live in Millsboro. I almost said I know Millsboro, meaning I know its track, its platform, its maintenance schedule. I didn't. I said, that's a long commute. I like the ride, she said. I like having the time in between. She paused. I like that nothing can reach me for an hour. Until today. Until today, she said. A small exhale that might have been the beginning of a laugh. I got the call at 6:15 and I got on the train. Yeah, I said. I'm not usually like this, she said. I solve things. I'm good at solving things. Bridges don't stay up because someone hoped they would. No, I said. They stay up because someone did the calculations correctly and checked them twice. She looked at me. Yeah, you can't calculate your way through a 2-week wait, I said. No, she said. Apparently not. She looked at her hands. I'm Claire. I know, I said. It's on your folder. She looked at the tote bag. The folder tab was visible, C. Maddox, project file. She made a sound, almost a laugh, genuinely surprised. Right. She looked back out the window. 6 years on this train, and you've never talked to anyone. 6 years, I said. What changed? I thought about Diane, about 2 years on a smooth track, about the cost of keeping the schedule at the expense of noticing what was actually happening. I heard someone say something true, I said, and I didn't want to be the kind of person who just keeps his eyes closed. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, That's a strange way to talk about yourself. I've been working on it, I said. The train pulled into the next stop. Neither of us moved. People boarded and settled and the doors closed and we were moving again, the wheels finding their rhythm on the track. We talked for the rest of the ride. Not about the screening. She had said what she needed to say about that, and I didn't push at it. We talked about her work. The specific, precise problem of load distribution on suspension bridges, which she explained with a kind of restrained enthusiasm that told me she was someone who had always been this interested in this and had learned to manage it in public. She asked what I actually did in rail planning, not politely, but with the genuine curiosity of someone who thinks about infrastructure all day and recognizes it in someone else. I told her about the service windows, the maintenance cycles, the specific knowledge that accumulates over years of keeping track of every car in a fleet. She said, So you know things about this train specifically? I said, The wheel set on car 4 needs looking at, but it's not urgent. The third connection is going to rattle until February. The window above us seals correctly. She looked at the window. She looked at me. That's a strange kind of intimacy, she said. I said, It is. Pittsburgh was visible before I wanted it to be. The skyline in the November gray, the bridges coming up across the river, her domain, not mine. And I watched her look at them the way I probably looked at the maintenance schedule when I was on home ground, assessing, knowing. I'm here every Wednesday and Friday, I said, as the train slowed toward the station. 6:50 out of Grayford. She was looking at the bridges. I know, she said. You know, I've seen you, she said. On this car. You always sit in the same window seat and you always close your eyes about 15 minutes in and you always look slightly relieved when you open them again. She looked at me. I thought you had some kind of commuter meditation practice. I was just tired, I said. I know that now, she said. The train stopped. People stood and moved. She picked up her tote bag, and I picked up my laptop bag, and we filed out onto the platform together without discussing it, and stood for a moment in the Pittsburgh air, which was cold and smelled like the river. Thank you, she said, for not just keeping your eyes closed. Thank you for saying something true, I said. She looked at me for a moment. Then she nodded once, pulled her collar up against the cold, and turned toward the exit. I watched her go and thought, I do not have her number. I do not know her last name except from a folder tab. I do not know anything except that she rides the 650 from Millsboro on Wednesdays, and she is good at making herself fine, and she needed someone to be actually there for an hour on a November morning. I went to my meeting. I gave the presentation. I answered questions. I took the 4 o'clock train back to Grayford and sat in the same window seat and looked out at the dark coming early and thought about what she'd said. I've seen you. I thought you had a commuter meditation practice. She had noticed me the way I noticed the track, cataloged me, filed me somewhere. On Friday, I was on the 650. She was already in the car when I got on. Different seat, middle of the car, aisle side with room next to her. She was looking at her phone and she did not look up when I boarded. I stood in the aisle for half a second, then sat down next to her. She looked up. 650 from Grayford, she said. Every Friday, I said. A pause, then she moved her bag from the seat to the floor between her feet, making room that was already there, and we sat in silence as the train pulled out. But it was a different kind of silence from the one before. Known now. The silence of people who have already said something real to each other and are figuring out what comes next. No news, she said, about 5 minutes out. From the follow-up appointment, still 2 weeks. Okay, I said. I told my sister last night, she said. She was what I expected. Which means she's already researching every possible outcome, and she's going to call me every day. Is that good or bad? It's Jess, she said. So it's both. She looked at her hands. It helped, actually, saying it to a real person. She paused. No offense. I was a real person, I said. You were asleep. I was not asleep. You were mostly asleep. I was in a transitional state, I said. She made the sound again, the one that might be a laugh. This time it was a laugh, brief and real, and it changed her face in the same way that real laughs always do, uncalculated, just there. I filed it. We rode together on Wednesdays and Fridays after that. It became the thing that it became without either of us deciding it, like a service schedule, once set, that you just follow because it works. We had coffee from our own thermoses and talked about bridges and trains and the specific frustrations of working in systems that predate you and will outlast you. She was funny in a way that had an edge to it, dry and quick, and she aimed most of it at herself, at the version of herself that had thought engineering would be a field where the variables stayed put. She said, "At least bridges hold still. People move around." I said, "Trains move around too." She said, "But they move on tracks. They go where you built them to go." I said, "Until they don't." She looked at me. "Until they don't," she agreed. She told me things gradually, across those rides, the way people do when they have an hour and a fixed end point and no obligation to continue when the train stops. She told me she had grown up in western Pennsylvania, the kind of town where the main export was young people leaving for somewhere else. And she had been one of them. She had gone to Pittsburgh for school on a partial scholarship and stayed because the work was there and because she had quietly decided, at 22, that she was going to be the kind of person who did not go back to the thing she had left. She said it without drama. She said it the way she said most things, as a fact about herself that she had already processed and filed. She had been in a long engagement once. She said it the same way, just a fact. The man had been someone she respected, she said, which was different from someone she loved. And she had taken a long time to understand that she had confused those two things on purpose, because respecting someone felt safer than loving them. She looked out the window when she said it. I didn't say anything. After a moment, she said, "You're not going to tell me that's a sad thing?" I said, "It sounds like something you already know." She was quiet for a second. "Yeah," she said, "I do." The thing about riding a train with someone twice a week is that you learn the quality of their silences. Some silences are rest. Some are avoidance. Some are the kind that happen when a person is thinking something they have not decided yet whether to say. I learned Claire's silences the way I had learned the sounds of the fleet, not by being told, but by sustained attention, by noticing the small things. One Friday, about a month in, she was quiet for almost the whole ride out of Millsboro. Not the avoidance kind, the thinking kind. I let it be. We were somewhere past the second stop when she said, without looking at me, "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah," I said. "The woman you mentioned. The relationship you implied. What happened?" I thought about how to answer that. I had mentioned Diane once, obliquely, when Claire had asked if I understood what it was like to stay in something longer than you should. I had said I did. "We were together for 5 years," I said. "The last 2 I was coasting. I told myself the relationship was fine, the way I tell myself a maintenance item is fine. I know it needs attention, but I can manage it until the next window." She figured out before I said anything that I had checked out. She ended it. She was right to. "Were you sad?" she said. "Yes," I said. "But not the way I should have been. I was sad the way you're sad when you miss a train. Inconvenient, a little embarrassed. Not the way you're sad when you lose something you can't replace." I looked at the fields. That told me something. She was quiet for a moment. "That told me something too," she said softly. "What?" "That you're more honest with yourself than most people," she said. "It's easier to tell a version where you were wronged. You didn't." I thought about that. I had not thought about it as honesty. I had thought about it as just accounting. But she was right that it was a choice, even if I had not experienced it as one. "You're doing it too," I said. "The thing you said about the engagement. You could have made it his fault." "It was partly his fault," she said. "I know," I said. "But you didn't lead with that." She was quiet. Outside, the first bare suburbs of the city were appearing on the horizon. She watched them for a moment. "My dad was an engineer," she said. "He used to say the worst thing you can do to a bridge is lie about how much weight it's carrying. You can reinforce a truthful load. You cannot reinforce a lie." She paused. I try to be accurate about my loads. I looked at her. She was still watching the suburbs, the skyline beginning to accumulate behind them. "Claire," I said. "Yeah. I'm glad you sat next to me that morning." She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, without turning, "Me too." The follow-up appointment was a Tuesday. I knew the date because she had mentioned it once. Flat and factual, the way she mentioned most things that mattered to her. On Wednesday morning, I was on the platform early. The train came in. The doors opened. I found the seat, the window seat in the back, mine, which she had started sitting near but never in, and I sat down. She boarded at Millsboro. She sat next to me. She had her coat collar up and her hands in her lap, and she looked out the window for the first 30 seconds without saying anything. And I did not say anything either, because I have gotten better at waiting. "Clear," she said. The follow-up came back clear. She said it the way you say something you have been holding very carefully for 24 hours and can now set down. It was a false positive on the first screen. They see it occasionally. Nothing to treat, nothing to watch. She exhaled. "I'm fine." "Claire," I said. "I know," she said. "I know. She pressed her mouth together. I'm not good at the part where I let it land. I just want to move forward. You can move forward and also let it land, I said. She looked at me. Her eyes were bright, not tears. Just the brightness that comes from holding something back for 2 weeks and then putting it down. When did you get wise? She said. I've been working on it, I said. Same answer as before. She laughed, properly this time. Short, surprised at herself. And then she put her head back against the seat and closed her eyes and just breathed for a moment. And I sat next to her and watched the winter fields go past and did not say anything, because that was what was needed, and I knew it. After a few minutes, she opened her eyes. Owen, she said. Yeah. Why do you close your eyes on this train? She looked at me. Actually, not the tired answer. I looked at the window, the fields, the bare trees, the pale winter light. It's the only place in my day where nothing needs deciding, I said. No schedule, no system. The car's either maintained or it isn't, and I already know which. The track does what the track does. The only job I have for an hour is to just go where it's taking me. I paused. I think I close my eyes because I can. She was quiet for a moment. That makes sense, she said. Not for someone who plans the maintenance schedule, I said. Especially for someone who plans the maintenance schedule, she said. You've seen everything that can go wrong. You know how close it always is to going wrong. Closing your eyes means you trust that it won't, that the work was good enough. She looked at the window. That's not avoidance. That's confidence. I had never thought about it that way. I turned it over. What do you do with your eyes closed? She said. Think, or actually just rest? Both, I said. Mostly think, if I'm honest. About what? I looked at the seat back in front of me. The last few months, about a woman on this train who talks to strangers when she thinks they're sleeping. She was quiet for a second, then very dry. I don't usually. I know, I said. That's what makes it matter. Another silence. The wheels on the track, smooth, steady. The third connection doing its small rattle. The November light through the window she had once told me sealed correctly. I noticed you for about 3 months before I sat next to you, she said. I want to be clear about that. I wasn't just sitting down randomly. I turned and looked at her. You picked that seat. I picked that seat, she said. On the morning you got a call you didn't know how to carry. Yes. Why? She looked at the window for a moment. Because you looked peaceful, she said. And I needed to be next to something peaceful for an hour. A pause. And because you looked like someone who would understand not wanting to be asked if you're okay. I thought about that. About what it means to look peaceful to someone who is quietly holding something heavy. About being the kind of landscape someone can sit next to. Claire, I said. Yeah. I'm going to ask if you're okay. A beat. I know. Are you? She was quiet for a moment. The train moved through a long curve, and the light shifted, and she looked at me. Really looked. The same way she'd looked at the bridges from the Pittsburgh platform, with the specific attention of someone who has been trained to see where the load is and whether the structure will hold. Yes, she said. Actually, yes. Not the managing it, yes. She looked back out the window. I think finding out you're okay feels different when you've had to actually wonder. It has more texture to it. Yeah, I said. I keep thinking about what I said on the train, she said. That morning, to someone I thought was asleep, that I just needed to say it out loud. She paused. I don't usually do that. I'm usually the person who handles things internally until they're handled. I know, I said. You don't know me that well yet, she said. No, I said. But I know that part. She looked at me. That part. The part where you'd rather manage alone than ask for help before you know if you need it, I said. Because asking before you need it feels like catastrophizing, and you don't catastrophize. A pause. How did you? Engineers, I said. You don't raise an alarm until the data supports it. She made the sound again. Laughed properly once. That's exactly it. She shook her head. That's exactly it. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't fully name. Something between recognition and relief. How are you like this? 11 years of reading maintenance reports, I said. You learn to see what the data is actually saying. And what is it saying now? She said. It came out quieter than the rest. I looked at her. The river gray eyes and the loose knot and the coat she had not taken off because the car was still cold at this end, and I had been meaning to put in a note about the heating unit in car 3. It's saying, I said, that a structural engineer I have known for 6 weeks is the first person in a long time who has made this train feel like it's actually going somewhere. She looked at me for a moment. Then she looked forward. The Pittsburgh skyline was starting to appear on the horizon, just the edges of it, the bridges coming up. Her bridges, or not hers, but known to her, catalogued, maintained in her mind the way the fleet was maintained in mine. I need you to know something, she said. Okay. I don't do things casually, she said. I'm not the kind of person who starts something and treats it like it's light, because it's not light for me, even when I want it to be. She looked at her hands. So if you're thinking about this the way I think you're thinking about it, I'm not thinking about it casually, I said. She looked at me. No, I said. I've been on this train for 6 years and I've never talked to anyone. I'm talking to you. I looked at the bridges. I'm not someone who changes his behavior without a reason. She was quiet for a moment. The train began to slow. Pittsburgh Station, the platform appearing. Around us, the other commuters were gathering their things. Okay, she said, quietly. Okay. We stood together and gathered our bags and filed off the platform. The Pittsburgh cold again, the river smell, the bridges visible from the station exit. She stood next to me and looked at them, just for a second, the quick inventory of someone who cannot not look. Dinner, she said. Friday, after the train. Yes, I said. Obviously, she said, and walked toward the exit. I watched her and thought, I have been planning maintenance windows for 6 years. I know what is overdue. I know when something has been left on the list too long. I went to my meeting. On the train back that evening, I sat in the window seat and closed my eyes. Not from avoidance, not from tiredness, because the work had been done correctly, and the track was good, and for the first time in a long time, I was going somewhere I actually wanted to arrive. 7 months later, Claire's name is in my phone under a contact photo she took of herself making a face about something I said, which is accurate. She splits her time between Millsboro and Grayford now, still on the 6:50 most Wednesdays and Fridays, but more of the others too. She has brought the restrained enthusiasm about load distribution into my apartment, which means there are now several books about bridge engineering on my shelves that I have actually read, because she talks about them the way I talk about rolling stock, and it turned out I was interested. Her sister Jess calls her every Sunday, and sometimes I can hear both sides of it from the next room, which tells you everything you need to know about Jess. The three-bedroom apartment we looked at on the good side of Grayford last month has big windows, the kind that go from close to the ceiling to close to the floor, and seal correctly on all sides. I checked. Claire stood next to me while I checked and did not say anything, but she had the expression she gets when she is trying not to be amused by something she is, in fact, entirely amused by. The maintenance on car 4 was completed in February, as scheduled. The third connection still rattles, but only slightly. It is on the list. These things take time. You don't rush a repair just because you've identified the fault. You plan the window, you gather the right tools, you do it correctly. And when it's done, there is nothing to see but the thing working the way it was built to work. I have kept the window seat at the back of the car. I close my eyes sometimes, on the long, straight stretch between Millsboro and the city, and listen to the wheels on the track, smooth and steady. The sound of a system that has been maintained and is holding. And I think about a November morning and a woman who sat down next to a person she thought was sleeping and said something true, because she needed it to be heard even by no one. I heard it. I hope she knows now what it meant that she said it, what it changed. In a person who had gotten very good at keeping his eyes closed to anything that might require him to stop the train and get off somewhere unscheduled. Maybe the thing that saves a life is never the dramatic one. Maybe it is smaller than that. A seat on a train, a voice that does not know it is being heard, and a person who finally decides that keeping his eyes closed is not the same as being at peace, and that the only way to actually arrive somewhere is to open them.